Toiros Sheburu Elikaini Tzuhuram Bedahas Bevinu Im Haskai Kohoyach Ekviru Nu Sambuhem Ki Yes Moshlim Bekerech Taivai Ay 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 Elavu Vayim Zilin Fikin Nohaiga Nu Azigibo Bichol Hu Oilo Smachin Betzaisam Besimsim Bevoyo Oisim Beyai Muritoin Kohinam Ay 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 Hey de Chuvoy Nos Nimlish Moy Zu Obu Verin Du Lizaychem Malchisoy Uru La Shemesh Usha Yizrachoy Ruhu Lehis Kintzira Sabunu
Shalom, my dear friends. Shalom from the holy city of Jerusalem. Today, the 27th day of the month of Sivan, 21st of June, the year 2017, the longest day of the year in the northern hemisphere, and a good day to try to make maximum use of the radiant light. It's actually been somewhat overcast in Jerusalem today, even had some specks of rain, which is very unusual for late Sivan on the threshold of the month of Tammuz. And God is indicating to us the drops of His love and kindness to us. Well, now, today we come to the absolute climax of our study of the book of Job, coming to the study of chapter 42, which is the concluding chapter, which, God willing, we shall be studying in the Hebrew text today. And in our session tomorrow, we'll look at some of the Talmudic and Midrashic and Kabbalistic allusions drawn out of the Behemoth and the Leviathan that have appeared in the chapter that we have been studying last, chapters 40 and 41. And let us therefore now turn today to our study of the book of Job. Shalom, today the 27th day of the month of Sivan of the year 5777, corresponding to the 21st of June of the year 2017. And today we reach the climax of our study of the book of Iyov, the conclusion of Iyov, the resolution and completion of the whole mystery of Job and his suffering. And by way of introduction to chapter 42, let us first follow through the summary of God's second address to Job in chapters 40 and 41. Writes the Metzudat David in his comment at the end of chapter 41. What comes out of this address is to answer Job over his complaint. Why had he suffered this mortal blow and wound when he had always done good? Well, the Almighty answers by saying, a true tzaddik would have the power of his arm, just like God, to rule over that is which is below and that which is above. This relates back to a comment that the Metzudat David had made on chapter 40, verse 9 of chapter 40, where God, in his questions to Job, he says to him, Im zro'ah ko'il loch uv'kol kamohu sar'im. If you have a mighty arm like God, and if you can thunder in a voice like him, then go ahead and you can quarrel with me. And there the Metzudat David had commented that man is made in the image of God, and when a man is complete in his form and does not incline in any way from the path of God, then his power is very great indeed, and he can rule over everything and even over the legions of the heavens, like it says of Joshua, that Joshua commanded the sun to stop still in its tracks over Giv'on, and the sun indeed became still. And there was never such a time when the Lord listened to the voice of a man, and that is why the Almighty, in his challenge to Job in chapter 40, had said to him, well, are you truly such a righteous tzaddik? And picking up on that now, the Metzudat David, in his summary of chapter 41, he says, a true tzaddik would have the power, like God, to rule over the realms above and below. And now let us test if you have the power to punish the sinners with the words of your mouth. In that case, I will acknowledge you that you are a completely righteous tzaddik. If you have that power, if you attain that level of perfection. But what significance is there that you praise yourself and claim that you are innocent? And if not so, if in fact you were a truly complete tzaddik, my hand has not become shortened from being able to repay you the requites of your goodness, because there's none in the universe that can protest at what I do. And thus the Almighty, in chapters 40 and 41, told Job about the wonders of the wild ox, the behemoth, and the wonders of the Leviathan, in order that from them he could infer the greatness of God, that there is none in creation that can possibly prevent God from repaying the requites of the tzaddik. And even though God has no obligation to do so, because God had already conferred goodness upon Job, even before Job fulfilled any of the commandments that he fulfilled, nevertheless, God can still repay a reward out of God's kindness. And likewise, if Job had been a tzaddik to the ultimate degree of perfection, then God would have given him the reward. That is to say, God implies that Job was lacking in complete righteousness, and indeed Job now confesses this. He had heard this from Elihu, who had said that one may be a righteous person but still fall short, and Job had fallen short. So with that introduction to by way of conclusion of the address of Job to the address of God to Job in chapter 41, we now come to chapter 42 of the Hebrew text, with now Job answering God in humility, his final confession and the summation of the entire book. Vaya'an Iyov es Adonai vayomar. And Job answered the Lord, and he said. So here we see now that Job is directly addressing God in the name of the Tetragrammaton, and this whole concluding section is in that name which appeared at the beginning of the book. And now Job has risen to the level of prophecy, where he is in this dialogue with the Almighty. Yodati ki chol tu chol. I knew that you are capable of everything. You are able to do everything. יודעתי כי כל תוכל, ולא יבוצר ממחו מזימו. I knew that everything you have power to do. ולא יבוצר ממחו, there shall not be withheld from you. Like a time of Bitzaron is a time of drought when the rains are withheld. And God had said to the generation of the building of the Tower of Babel that nothing will be withheld from them. The same verb. Job acknowledges there is no plan and counsel that can be withheld from you. That is to say, here Job confesses that God indeed has complete providence over all of creation, and that not a detail is withheld from him, not a thought, not a counsel withheld from them. Mize mali meitzo. Who is this that is concealing the counsel? Belidoas, without understanding. Lochein higadati velo ovin. Therefore I spoke forth when I did not understand. Niflos mimeni velo eido. There were wonders greater than me that I did not know. Going back to the beginning of verse 3, Mizeh ma'alim eitzo. Who is this that is hiding counsel? Here Job is alluding to God's challenge to him at the beginning of God's first answer to Job out of the Se'ara, the storm wind, at the beginning of chapter 38. And there God had said in the opening words to Job, verse 2 of chapter 38, Mize machshich eitzo v'milin belidoas. Who is this that is darkening counsel with words that are without understanding? That is to say that God was telling Job that he has not reached at all any understanding of the deep counsel and wisdom that lies behind every detail of creation, all under God's providence. And here in our verse in chapter 42, verse 3, when Job addresses God, he says, quoting back, Mize malim eitzo, who is it who is concealing the counsel? He's going to say, yes, indeed, he confesses that was me. Mize malim eitzo, he softens the word that had been used in the verse we saw in verse, we just heard in chapter 38, verse 2, Mize machshich eitzo, who is darkening counsel. Here it's a softer term, who is concealing counsel, and he confesses belidos. It was without understanding. I did not understand. Lochein higalati v'lo ovin. Therefore I spoke forth, but I did not understand. Niflos mimeni v'lo eido. There were wonders too great for me that I did not know. Shmano v'anuchi adabir. Job addressing now God. Shmano, please hear. V'anuchi adabir, I shall speak. Esh'olocho v'hodi'eni. Here Job is quoting the word spoken by God to him again at the beginning of his challenge to Job in chapter 38, when going into the series of the 50 questions that God put to Job in chapter 38, verse 3. At the end, the verse says, gird up like a man your loins, and I shall ask you, and you make it known to me. Exactly the same phrase as we have here in the end of verse 4. Esh'olocho v'hodi'eni. I shall ask you and make it known to me. That is to say, Job is quoting the Almighty. As to what you said, I shall ask you and you let it known to me. My answer now, Job says to you, is L'shema oizin shematicho v'ato eini ro'oscho. L'shema oizin shematicho. Before, it was only l'shema oizen, to the listening of the ear, by report and tradition handed down from others. Shematicho, I had heard of your report, I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear. V'ato eini ro'oscho, but now my eye has seen you. Now that I have risen to the level of prophecy that you have brought me to, I now see what I never before understood. Al kene im'as v'nichamti al ofo vo'efer. Job's concluding words, his seal on the whole book. Al kene im'as. Therefore, I despise. V'nichamti al ofo vo'efer. Nichamti, I have become consoled. Al ofo vo'efer, over earth and ashes. Again, verse 6, Al ken em'as, therefore I despise that which previously I had held to be important, earthly prosperity and well-being. After all of these explanations I have heard from Elihu, and now out of the mouth of God, from the whirlwind, the storm wind, therefore I now despise what previously was important to me. V'nichamti, I've received my consolation, al ofo vo'efer, over earth and ashes. We see that Abraham too had addressed God with the humility to say, V'ani ofo vo'efer, I am earth and ashes. And here Job too reaches the same level of understanding. Nichamti, I've had consolation over this. Before, Job's question was out of the perplexity of why had his body been destroyed in this way, and he was hoping for the grave, and now he is saying the grave indeed is his consolation, because he sees that God's providence extends beyond the grave. Well, for the very great importance of these verses, let us go back to the beginning of the chapter and take a look at what our commentators have to say about these introductory words of the concluding chapter, chapter 42. Following through first the commentary of Rashi, Rashi tells us at the end of chapter 41 that I've created these the Leviathan, who is the king over all of the people that have arrogance, and I have created one in the world that against him they have no power or rule at all. And since I created that Leviathan, how did your heart lift you up to start putting your head above before me, to raise your head to argue against me? For it is I who have performed all of these wonders. That is Rashi's summation of God's answer to Job. And then Rashi comments on the opening of chapter 42, verse 2, I knew that you are capable of everything, for you are able to do everything that is righteous in your eyes, and nothing is withheld from you. He's repeating himself that there is not a thought, not a plan that is possibly withheld or concealed from God. For all of your thoughts and plans, the Almighty, you're able to bring them to completion and to fulfillment, because in your hands is the power and the strength, and it is in your hand to do everything that is good in your eyes. And then on verse 3, the Hebrew text says, who is this who was concealing counsel? Rashi says, who is this that has concealed and covered over his counsel and his wonders, the wonders of the Holy One, blessed be he, without understanding. As if to say, he is confessing that he had indeed done that. He had covered over the wonders and the counsel of God through not understanding it. And now Rashi paraphrases, he says, I knew that everything was in your hand to do it, and therefore I told just some of your mighty deeds as was in my heart to tell, and as far as I knew then, but I did not understand it so much as now you have made it known to me through God's bringing Job to prophecy in chapters 38 onwards. For there are so many wonders that were concealed and hidden away from me that I did not know. So Job's humble confession of ignorance, which indeed is the very beginning of true wisdom. And then Rashi on verse 5 very tellingly on Job saying, at the hearing of the ear did I hear of you, says, how many times I heard of your fame, but now my eyes have seen your Shekhinah. Rashi uses this word Shekhinah, that's to say, the use of the word Shekhinah by Rashi here indicates that Shekhinah, the divine indwelling presence, that Job indeed had prophecy from the Holy One, blessed be he. And now, he says, now that I have been worthy to witness your Shekhinah, I despise my life, that is to say, his life in this world, and I shall be comforted if I will dwell in the grave and to return to dust and ashes, that I was taken from them. So that is Rashi's paraphrase. Now going ahead to the Ramban, introducing these chapters, paraphrasing and explaining them. Ramban on the verse 3, who is this that is concealing and hiding away so much wisdom that is done through counsel on account of his not having known it? It is I who said this thing to my friends. That is to say that, according to Ramban's interpretation of verse 3 again, Job is quoting the Almighty in his reply. He said, as to when you asked, who is this that is darkening counsel? I answer, who was it who was concealing the counsel? That is me. That is what I said to my friends, but I did not understand the deep counsel of God. There were wonders beyond me that even now I cannot truly know and understand. And Ramban points up, God had called him machshich, that he had darkened the counsel, but in fact he was concealing the counsel because of his lack of da'at, his lack of knowledge. Job concealed and hid it away, questioning how could something like this happen, that the righteous suffers, because he did not understand the depths of God's providence. And on verse 4, the Ramban comments, hear please, and I will speak. I will ask you and make it known to me. He says, for I, Job, cannot know anything of your wonders except what you make known to me through your kindness. Verse 5, L'shema oizen shematicho, at the listening of the ear I heard of you. Says Ramban, in the mouth of Job, I had a Kabbalah, I had a tradition received of your godliness, but now I have reached the prophecy, and I know the truth of the existence of God, and that you exist, and you know, and you providentially watch over and judge with abundant righteousness and kindness and truth. And continues Ramban, therefore I despise what I had once wanted until now, that is the life of this world and the tranquility that I had, that I used to want, and I complained previously about my having lost them. This I now despise. V'nichamti al ovo v'efer, I am comforted over dust and ashes, earth and ashes. That is to say, that is the body, says the Ramban, the body that is indeed earth and ashes. For so the righteous do confess before their Creator in the mode of Abraham in Genesis chapter 18, verse 27, I am dust and ashes, said Abraham. And Ramban says Job is now saying that he is comforted over the body, that he once wanted it, and he saw that life is kindness, whereas death for the tzaddik would appear to be Hamas, a grave outrage. But now I am comforted, says Ramban in the mouth of Job, I'm comforted over my having desired the body, and now I want only to be attached to you, to the light, in the light of your presence, and that my soul should be bound up with you in the bond of life. So that is Ramban, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman's interpretation of these verses. And let us now turn to Metzudat David, who sums all this up very beautifully on these very important verses, which are really a key to understanding what has been achieved through this entire debate in the book of Job. On verse 3, who is this that is concealing the counsel? Paraphrases the Metzudat David. He's saying that as to what God had said in his first address to Job, who is this that is darkening counsel? For concealing and darkening, they're one and the same thing, except that now Job is using expression of greater honor and dignity, as if God had said to him, who is this that swelled in his heart to imagine that the correct counsel is concealed from me? That is to say, who is this that is darkening counsel? Who is this that is concealing the counsel? Who had the boldness to imagine that the counsel is concealed from God? And that thought was without da'at, without true understanding, because Job had entertained the thought that God had put over everything into the blind system of fate governed by the constellations and the planets. Now, Metzudat David explaining what Job is saying when he says, Lochein higalati v'lo ovin, Lochein, therefore I said it, said Job, without understanding. Says Metzudat David, over this, your challenge to me, I will answer, therefore, on account of this very thing that I was without da'at, I did not have the knowledge. And that's why I spoke then this folly, this idea that everything is under a blind fate. And I did not understand then anything of the wonders of your providence. For the things that you have now related to me about the greatness of your providence, they were things that were wondrous and hidden from me, and I did not know them, namely all of God's questions to him in chapters 38 and 39 onwards. As if to say, in truth, I spoke without understanding in what I said. But now, after you have told me about your providence, I acknowledge to you that this is the truth. And on verse 4, the Metzudat David paraphrases, Shema no, verse 4, please hear and I will speak, let me ask you and let it be known to me. He once again, in verse 4, Job goes back and says to God, please hear me that I will speak to answer what you said in the second address that you gave to me, that is in chapter 40 onwards. When God challenged Job with the words, I will ask you and you let it be known to me. I will ask you about the amazing wonders of God, and now and answer me, said God to Job in his challenge. You answer if that is the truth, and in answer to that challenge of God, I'll ask you and you tell it to me. Now Job in verse 5 states his final words, as paraphrased by Metzudat David, L'shema oizen, in accordance with what the ear hears. That is to say, over that question, let me answer thus. Formerly, I only heard of your fame and report, namely that it was always in the mode of something that is heard, that is not so inscribed on the heart of the listener when they've only heard it secondhand. But now my very eyes have seen you, and from you have come forth these words, and therefore they are inscribed in my heart. And if so, I have found an answer, that it was not because of any shortness of the hand that you withheld from repaying me a reward, but on account of the fact that I had not yet reached the ultimate righteousness with completion and fulfillment, and therefore I have no right to ask of a reward from your hand. Most a tremendously humble answer of Job, that he has received the message, the chastisement of the whole book. And therefore verse 6, in the paraphrase of Metzudat David, Al ken emas v'nechamti, arof v'efer, Job's closing words, on account of the love of this understanding and attainment that I have now attained in virtue of my eyes having seen you, I therefore despise all of the worldly possessions, for all of them are as nothing before the preciousness of this attainment, this apperception of God. V'nechamti, I'm comforted. Now I have comfort, great comfort over the pain that I was in when I was sitting in the earth and the ashes, like it says at the beginning of the book, that Job went to sat in the ashes, chapter 2, verse 8, because this suffering was actually the cause for me to come to the perception of the real truth. So those we see there from the line of Rashi and Ramban and Metzudat David, who are in that same order chronologically, going in a single line really to the understanding of these sections, and now coming to God's words to the other companions. Going now to verse 7 of chapter 42. ויהי אחר דיבר אדוני אס הדבורים האלה אל איוב, ויאמר אדוני אל אליפז התימוני, חורו אפי וכו ובשני רעךו, כי לא דיברתם אלי נכונו כעבדי איוב. ויהי אחר דיבר אדוני אס הדבורים האלה אל איוב, And it was after that Hashem spoke these words to Eov, these words above, Vayomer Adonai el Eliphaz Atemoni, and the Lord spoke to Eliphaz the Temani, Choro api v'cho, my anger burns against you, uv'shnei re'echo, and your two companions, Bildad Ashuchi and Tzofar Anamoti, the two other companions. My anger burns against you and the two companions. Ki lo dibartem elai nechono, for you did not speak with respect to me correctly, ka'avdi Eov, like my servant Job. And presently we shall see how our commentators explain where the companions fell short. Ve'ato kechulochem shiv'o forim v'shiv'o eilim u'lechu el avdi Eov v'halisem oilo ba'adechem ve'Eov avdi ispalel alechem ki im ponov eso levilti asois imochem nevolo כי לא דיברתם אלי נכונו כעבדי איוב. Verse 8, a truly lengthy verse. V'ato, and now, k'chu lochem shiv'o forim, take for yourselves 7 oxen, v'shiv'o elim, and 7 rams, v'lechu el avdi Eov, and go to my servant Job. Va'alisem oilo ba'adechem, and you shall offer up the oilo, burnt offering, holy burnt offering, on your account for your sake. Ve'Eov avdi yispalil aleichem, and Job my servant shall pray over you, for you. Ki im ponov esor, for indeed his face shall I raise, I shall pay regard to him. Levilti asois imochem nevolo, not to do with you some dreadful, shameful verdict. Ki lo dibartem elai nechoino, for you did not speak to me nechoino, correctly and with a proper foundation, ke'avdi Eov, like my servant Job. And we see here how God is repeatedly attesting that Job indeed is his servant, and has been proven after all of this. And let us understand now what is the way our commentators explain this section, where just as in Genesis, when Avimelech, the king of the Pelishtim, the Philistines, had taken Sarah, and God intervened with Avimelech in a dream, and Avimelech was forced to restore her to Abraham. Abraham there was called to pray for Avimelech and the members of his household, and there is the first case in the Torah of the tzaddik praying for the healing and atonement of others. And here we have this with Job, a prophet to the nations, and to all outward appearances in the book of Job as being not one of the Israelite prophets, but a prophet generally, as presented in our story, of addressing the nations. In the Kabbalistic view, the Gilgul, the reincarnation of Terach, the father of Abraham, Terach having to have suffered to atone for the sins of his lifetime. And here Eov becomes the Kohen who is presiding over these sacrifices and offering the prayers. So what indeed was the flaw? Let us again turn to our commentators. On verse 7, Vayomer Hashem Eliphaz the Temanite, God spoke to Eliphaz the Temanite, This man too attained the level of prophecy on account of his level in wisdom, for he was the greatest of the three companions, as Ramban had specified, and we touched on at the beginning of chapter 22. Eliphaz was the leader, and here we see in our text that Hashem speaks to Eliphaz, that indicates prophecy, and Ramban raises the possibility that this prophecy came to Eliphaz in the form of a dream in the night, as indeed Eliphaz in his first address had spoken about the ways that prophecy may come to people. But he did not speak right, says God to Eliphaz. You did not speak of me, that is, which is firmly based. Ramban paraphrases, says, you have made a mistake, and on account of all your arguments, you have actually made God out to be one that performs an outrage in the eyes of anyone that knows the righteousness of his own soul, because you found no answer to Job's complaint that he was suffering without cause. You found no answer to him. Elihu found an answer, and Elihu here is not chastised, but the three companions had not found an answer. And now, says Ramban, continuing on his interpretation of verse 7, not like my servant Job. Now he calls him his servant on account of his having confessed to God now in the previous words of this chapter. And now look, says Ramban, both the companions and Job were in error, except that Job spoke nechonah, he spoke correctly, that he was righteous. And God does bring troubles to those who perform his will, but he did not know why. And Elihu explained to him the reason. And therefore Job did speak rightly, and he confessed, and it has been atoned for him over his having complained about this matter. And this is why he calls him now his servant, as he did at the outset of the book. But the companions, explains Ramban, did not speak correctly because they tried to rule that Job must have been wicked, and the proof was that he was suffering, and they assumed that they were doing something good and trying to justify God's ways in chastising Job for what must have been in their eyes some sins of Job. And because they thought they were doing the right thing in justifying God's ways in sending suffering to anybody, explains the Ramban, they had not confessed, and that is why they needed now atonement, because they did not speak what is right with respect to God. And Ramban continues in his interpretation of this section, verse 8, take your 7 oxen. He says, Ramban, that the sin was shigaga. It was an involuntary, not an intentional rebellion, but a shgaga, an unwitting sin. And that may be atoned through the korban, through the sacrifice, just as the shgagot, the unwitting sin offerings in the Torah, atone for Israel. And God says, in the words of Ramban, go to my servant Job and offer up a offering, a burnt offering for him through Job, who will be the one to offer the offering and to pray that the offering should find favor before God from his hand. For it is Job to whom I will pay respect, for I have seen him fit, says Ramban, I've seen Job fit to be a kohen, a priest before me. And the reason why in verse 8, God uses the expression in the Hebrew that Job will pray for you, for his face shall I raise and respect. Levilti asois imochem nevala, not to do with you nevala. Nevala is a very negative word. It is something that is truly despicable, truly ugly. And if after the sin of the three companions, the shagaga, the unwitting sin of failing to truly do justice to God's ways, then Ramban explains that since after all, these three companions were trying to justify God's ways, even though they did not do so successfully because they did not find an answer to Job, nevertheless, they were trying to justify God's ways. So if God were to bring upon the three companions some evil, it would seem to be something unfitting to cause now suffering to three people who had spoken to justify God's ways. Well, now, looking at the commentary of Rashi on the section of the Eliphaz and the companions, verse 7, Rashi tells us, indeed, the two companions, these are Bildad Hashuchi and Sofar Hanamati, they too with Eliphaz, Kilodi Baratem, you did not speak properly, says Rashi, you did not give an adequate answer in the way that Job has spoken. For Job did not transgress against me except on account of his having said that it's all equal, the innocent and the wicked does God consume. That was the heresy that Job had given expression to in chapter 9, verse 22. It's all equal, the innocent and the wicked God consumes. And this was all on account of the Satan that was let loose against him. And if Job went any further, says Rashi, paraphrasing why God is turning to the companions, if Job went any further and speaking out before me, it was the harshness of the suffering that were weighing heavy upon him and so strong to the point that he spoke. But your transgression was on account of actually judging God guilty by saying to Hirshatim Oisa that your sin was in judging Job guilty by saying in Eliphaz first addressed to Job, chapter 4, verse 6, he says, your fear that has turned out to be your folly, that you never had real fear of God and you were really wicked, and all the time you held him to have been wicked, and in the end you were silenced and you were conquered by him, and you should have then comforted him in the way that Elihu comforted him. Was it not sufficient that Job had his suffering and his chastisements, that you added to your sins the added transgression of provoking him? And that's why you need to bring this sacrifice. And now, continues Rashi in his comment, you have to bring this olah offering for yourselves in order to find favor again in my eyes. And it must be that Job will be the one who will perform this sacrifice, for only he is fit to do so. And likewise, in a similar path goes the Metzudat David, explaining from verse 7 why God is angry with Eliphaz and his two companions, Bildad and Zophar, on account of your not having spoken on my account a proper answer, a true answer to Job, because you said that his suffering came to him on account of his great sin, and that is not the case, because he did not sin excessively, even though he had not yet attained the ultimate perfection, and the requite of a person's deeds is from the side of God's kindness, and he has simply not been fit as yet to receive the kindness. So you do not speak right in the way that my servant Job did. Avdi Eov paraphrases the Metzudat David. Eov, he says, did not speak correctly, because he said everything comes out of this blind system of fate. But you too did not speak justly by saying that his suffering came on account of his abundant sins. And if indeed Job did not speak correctly, nevertheless, God calls him my servant, and our sages say, this is a passage in the Talmud, Bava Basra, in the Sugya of Job, Daf Tes Zayin Amud Bes, Mikan Shein Odom Nispas Al Saroi. From here, a person is not caught out on what he may say out of pain. A very important teaching, for it was on account of the suffering that Job said what he said. So Job's transgression was a transgression, but not a serious transgression. A person is not caught out on what they say out of pain and suffering. And then continues a very beautiful narrative in the conclusion of this most remarkable Sefer, Job chapter 42, the concluding section, as the sacrifices are offered and the atonement is brought about. Chapter 42, verse 9, Vayelchu Eliphaz HaTemoni uVildan HaShuchi Tzofar Anamosi Vayasu Kasher Diber Alehem Adonai Vayiso Adonai Es Pnei Eov. And there went Eliphaz the Temani and Bildad the Shuchi and Tzofar Anamoti. They did as God had spoken to them. Vayiso Hashem Es Pnei Eov. God showed favor to the face of Job. He accepted his prayer. And now the happy ending, Vadunoi shoves shvus Eov, bispalalo ba'ad re'ehu, vayosef Adonai es kol asher Eov leMishnah. And God came back, or he restored the shvus, the captivity of Job, behispalalo, on account of his having prayed ba'ad re'ehu, for his companions. Vayosef Adonai es kol asher Eov leMishnah. And the Lord added everything that Job had to double, increased everything to double. A very interesting comment by the Ramban on this verse, verse 10, commenting on the phrase in the Hebrew, Shov es shevus Eov, that God restored the captivity of Job, which suggests that something that had been taken away in captivity was brought back to him. And on this, Ramban spins the idea that actually when the Malachim, at the beginning of the book, in the opening narrative, after the Satan was allowed to set forth on Job's property, and all that he had, when the Malachim came, the agents, they were the agents of the Satan, who actually told Job that the properties had been destroyed, the cattle and sheep and camels had been taken away. Ramban says, well, it was a kind of sleight of hand by where they were all concealed from Job during this period of his suffering, but actually they were all actually restored now in themselves. It was all a kind of magical concealment, a very amazing insight there from Ramban. In any event, we do see here in the pshat, the simple meaning of our text, that Job had now a double portion. Verse 11, Vayovo Elov kol echo v'chol achyoso v'chol yodov lefonim vayochlu imo lechem b'veisoi vayonudu loi v'nechmu oisoi al kol roa asher evi Adonai olov v'yitnu loi ish kesito echos v'ish nezem zohov echod. Very lengthy verses in this narrative now. Vayovo Elov, that came to him, kol echo v'chol achyoso, of all his brothers and all his sisters. B'chol yodov lefonim, all of those who had known him from before, all his previous friends. We have seen in Job's complaints, in the course of his addresses, that everyone had run away from him, they'd all hidden away from him, all those who knew him, all his family, so now they all come back again. How extraordinary, what a sad human trait it is that there are levels of suffering that we cannot bear to watch and we retreat from. So now they come back. Vayochlu imoy lechem beveisoi. They eat with him bread in his house, bread as a collective term for a meal. In his house now, a meal of hodaya, of thanksgiving. Vayonudu loi. They all nodded their heads to him. They comforted him over all the evil that God had brought upon him. They gave to him each one kesito echos. Kesito interpreted by the commentators, whether it is a coin or the Targum says churpa, a lamb. Each one brought a gift. Ve'ish nezem zohav, each one a nose ring of gold. A symbolic showering of gifts and goodness now on Job. And the Lord blessed the end of Job more than at his beginning. Vahiloi albo'o osor 1,000 tson, v'sheshes alofim gemalim, ve'elef tzemet bokor, ve'elef asoinois. V'aldunoi beirach es achris Iyov mereshisoi, God blessed the end of Job more than his beginning. Vahiloi, a pazer note on the loi, vahilo, aboho, osor 1,000 tzoin, v'sheshes alofim gemalim, v'elef tzemed bokol, v'elef asoinois. And he had 14,000 sheep and sheshes alofim gemalim, 6,000 cows, 1,000 tzemed bokol, 1,000 pairs of oxen, v'elef asoinois, 1,000 donkeys, all doubled from the figures we had at the outside of the book. Vahiloi shiv'anno vonim v'sholosh bonois. Vahiloi shiv'anno vonim. And he had shiv'anno. Shiv'anno, the form is explained by the commentators to mean double 7. A dual form of 7, that is 14 sons. Double the 7 he had at the outset. Usholosh bonois, 3 daughters, not here apparently doubled. Vayikro shemo achas yemimo, and he called the name of the one Yemimo, Jemima. Yemima from the Hebrew word day, the brightness of day in her radiance. V'shem hasheni is Ketzio. The name of the second was Ketzio, the very fragrant scent of the Ketzio aromatic herb. V'shem hashlishi is Keren Hapuch. And the name of the third was the Keren, the horn, that is to say, the horn of light of the Puch stone, the brightly shining stone, be it an emerald or a diamond. ולא נמצא נושם יופויס כבנוס איוב בכל האורץ. Verse 15, ולא נמצא נושם יופויס כבנוס איוב בכל האורץ, ויתן אלוהם אביהם נחלו בסוך אחיהם. ולא נמצא נושם יופויס כבנוס איוב. There were not found women as beautiful as the daughters of Eov, בכל האורץ, in all of the land. ויתן אלוהם אביהם נחלו בסוך אחיהם. And their father gave to them an inheritance among their brothers, a very egalitarian arrangement by Eov to give his illustrious, fragrant, and shining, dazzling daughters share among their brothers. According to Torah law, for Israel, the brothers alone would receive the whole property of the father and take care of the girls, but the girls would not receive an allowance in the father's inheritance if there are brothers. Here, very egalitarian approach by Job to give them a nachalo among their brothers. And Job lived after this for 140 years. ויראה אס בונו ואס בני בונו ארבו דורויס. And he saw his sons and the sons of his sons 4 generations, as opposed to at the outset where his sons had been apparently killed. He now saw living before him these 4 generations of offspring of his sons. Vayomos Eov zokein usva yomim. And Job died an elder and satisfied of days. Blessed be the Lord God that has brought us to make this siyum, this conclusion of the book of Eov, one of the masterpieces of our holy Tanakh, a fountain of wisdom. We cannot just leave the book of Job so hastily, and in our concluding session, the next session, we shall look back over the whole book and at the general lessons we can learn, and also look into the Talmudic and Kabbalistic and Hasidic view of the Behemoth and the Leviathan. So with that, my dear friends, we bring to an end our study of the Tanakh for today, and we'll have a very brief interval, after which we'll come to begin the closing chapter of Masechet Shabbat in just a few moments.
بزاكيف كفيفي نوي بزاكيف كفيفي وذي رحبي نوي بدايق بزاكيفي مخي خرمايو بزاكيف كفيفي مخي خرمايو كيف كفيفي وباي رحبي لوي بدايق بساكيفي مخي خرمايو بزاكيف كفيفي مخي خرمايو بزاكيف كفيفي اوي باي اوي باي mayu bezakif kefifi mukhikh mayu bezakif kefifi li khine mashlina fi yo gevir tayt bekhishbena kari boyinu lamri boyinu lamri boyinu lam yom mayu anti maliku malchayu Yasuna mi yipi maryabusu ta da 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 mahina oh ina da da ta da 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 moi vi apai yasamai vi apai Yasamai mi goy gulisu ta da 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 boy vey oy na da da ta da 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 moy hamahbaba yidi bikhavat mikol imayu Kari baba in ulam yoli baba you Ahamti malku melech malchayu We vat gevit tayt vesimayu Tanana yidana lidom we vey oy Hey na 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 yo 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 la 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 oh la 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 shvar kudum akhle hagvayu la miktusha למקדושה יחתיים ולקוידש כי יצ'י אוי 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 ואי עשחתי ויחתי Asardi vayerdi in richin lenavavshi Ay 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 Oy vey bizamrin lovavo shirin lenavavshi Birishlayim kartu de shifrayu Ay 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 Ani boynu lambe yohmayu yo 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 anti malku meilech malcha Vat gevir tayi vesimayu
Shalom, my dear friends, shalom again. And now we come today to our study of the Mishnah, now launching into the closing chapter of our tractate, which, with the help of God, I hope we will be finishing between this session and the next session. So without further ado, let us go into the Mishnah. Shalom, today, the 27th day of the month of Sivan of the year 5777, corresponding to the 21st of June of the year 2017. And we now come to enter Perek Chof Dalet, chapter 24 of Masechet Shabbat, the tractate of Shabbat, the concluding chapter of this tractate, which now turns to a picture of somebody who has been late on getting home on the Shabbat, and it's Friday afternoon. He's been delayed, and he's got his purse with him as well as whatever else he may have with him. What is he to do with it, given that you are not allowed to carry through the public domain on the Shabbat, and in any case the money on the Shabbat will be muktzeh if it's late Friday afternoon? What is he to do? Mishehechshich baderech, somebody who has gotten dark on the road, that is to say, he's reached on Friday afternoon the point where it's getting dark. Noisen kisoy lenochri, he gives his purse to a non-Israelite, Nachri, a pagan, somebody that is not bound by Torah law. Ve'im ein imoy Nachri manicho al hachamur, and if there was not with him a pagan for him to hand the human the money, then manicho al hachamur, he may rest it on the donkey. Situation here is that although under normal circumstances one cannot tell a non-Jew to a non-Israelite to do on the Shabbat something that would be forbidden for the Israelite himself to do, here that is in essence a rabbinical enactment, because actually according to Torah law the non-Israelite is not bound to abstain from labor on the Shabbat. So if an Israelite makes a non-Israelite do a labor on the Shabbat, there is no actual Torah prohibition, and the prohibition involved is the rabbinical prohibition of telling him and having him do it on the Shabbat. Well, here in the case of financial loss that will come to a person if they don't find some way to get their wallet and their precious valuables home on the Shabbat, the sages fear that if you don't give the person a means of doing it legitimately, then he will come himself out of his love of his money and his desire not to lose it. He will come to carry it anyway, 4 cubits in the public domain. If you don't allow him some other way, he will violate the Shabbat. So to prevent him doing that, they relaxed the prohibition of telling a non-Israelite to do the labor on the Shabbat. The Nachri, the non-Israelite, will do it. And that is the favored way to do it. Ideally, if there would be a non-Israelite to carry the valuables. Ve'im ein imoy Nachri, but if there's no Nachri, no non-Israelite with him, manichoy al achamor, he may set the wallet on the donkey, that the donkey will actually carry the load. And clearly this is the second choice that the Mishnah gives to the individual. It's second because there is a problem involved in putting the articles on the donkey on the Shabbat. And this is derived from the words of the 4th commandment in Exodus in chapter 20, where in the commandment of the Shabbat in verse 10 it says, you shall not do any labor, not you, not your manservant, not your maidservant, uvehemtecho, and your animal. In other words, there is on the Shabbat a prohibition against a human making the animal do the work on the Shabbat. And the work involved is called Mechamer. Mechamer is where the human is leading on the donkey and making, or the animal, and making the animal carry the burden. And this is called Mechamer from the root of chamor, the donkey. Mechamer is to make the donkey go. And this is held to be forbidden on the Shabbat on account of the fourth commandment, not making the donkey work. Now here there are extenuating circumstances, and the Talmud explains that the full prohibition of mechamer, of driving the donkey on the Shabbat, would be if the donkey performed the complete act of carrying, as we saw at the outset of the tractate, and here we are harking back to that. We saw that the act of hotza'ah, of taking out from the private domain to the public domain, or of tiltul, the carrying in the public domain, the Reshut HaRabim, involves three phases: akira, tiltul, and hanacha. Akira, the uprooting of the object from where it was, the movement of the object, and placing it down, coming to a stop and putting it down. That is the entire labor of carrying in the public domain. And what would be forbidden is where the donkey did all of that. If the item was on the donkey and the donkey was at a standstill, and then the donkey proceeds, the donkey itself uproots the object from where it was as the donkey walks, and when the donkey comes to a stop, that is the hanacha, the object is being placed down. Now, the Talmud explains that the preferred way to have the donkey carry the item in these extenuating circumstances on the Shabbat would be that only when the donkey is already in motion would the owner put the purse on the donkey. In other words, once the donkey starts moving, he puts the purse on the donkey so that the donkey itself did not do the hanacha, did not do the akira, did not do the uprooting of the object from where it was. And the donkey goes with the object on its back, admittedly carrying in the public domain. But when the donkey is about to come to a stop, at that point the owner takes off the purse from the donkey before the donkey comes to a stop, and that way the donkey did not do the hanacha either, so the complete malacha was not done. And in these extenuating circumstances, the sages permitted here to do this with the donkey if no Gentile was available. Continuing with laws relating to what would happen on a Friday afternoon when the person gets home already after the Shabbat has begun, and you have the problem what to do if your animal is loaded up. The Mishnah tells us, Higia lechotze hachitzono. When the person gets to the outer courtyard, Noitel es akedim anitolen b'Shabbos, he would take off the utensils that may be carried on the Shabbat, that are not muktzeh. V'she'enon nitolen b'Shabbat, matir es hachavolim ha'sakin noiflin me'alehem. Those that may not be carried on the Shabbat, he would release the ropes that were tying the load of the donkey on it, and the sakim, the packages, the sacks would fall off by themselves. This second part of the Mishnah, Higia l'chotzer chitzona, when he reaches the outer courtyard, this is speaking about something separate from the first case where the Mishnah spoke about getting one's purse home on Friday evening after the onset of the Shabbat. Here we're talking about where the man was late getting home and the animal was already loaded up with merchandise and whatever. And when he gets to the Chotzer HaChitzona, the first available yard in the town or the village where he's going to be able to unload this animal, we cannot leave the goods on the animal, even though they may be muktzeh, not movable, on the Shabbat. To leave them on the animal would be called tsar balei chayim. There will be pain to living animals. So we give him the way to remove the things that are on the animal. The vessels that had been loaded on the animal, which may be moved on the Shabbos, if it was barrels of oil or wine or the like, that he may unload from the animal with no fear. These are not muktzeh on the Shabbat. But those things that may not be taken on the Shabbat because they are muktzeh, for example, merchandise which a person does not handle on the Shabbat, it's set aside for weekday commerce. In that case, matir es hachavole masakin niflim me'alehem. He would untie the straps, the ropes around the animal, and the packages would fall by themselves, and that way the animal would be released. Where necessary, he would be able to put a cushion or a blanket or a pillow under the items as they fall to reduce any breakage as the things fall to the ground. Continuing now with care of animals on the Shabbat. We've seen that it is a mitzvah to let the animal rest on the Shabbat. The Torah speaks about all levels of life, not only of humans, but also of animals. And it is a mitzvah on the owner of the animal to feed the animal. So Mishnah 2, the second Mishnah of chapter 24, Matirin pekie omer lifnei behemo. It is permissible to open the bundles of the omir, which is the hay, the straw that the animal is going to be feeding off. It's permitted to open this up because only when the bundles are opened is it going to be possible for the animal to eat. So it's necessary for the animal to eat. Umefaspesim es akifin, aval lo es hazirim. It is permitted to crush and separate the kifin, which are the branches of the cedar or pine trees, the more tender offshoots, but the zirin, which is the tightly bound bundles of straw, that you may not do this labor of mefaspesin. Mefaspesin is not intrinsically forbidden on the Shabbat where it's necessary. In the case of the kifin, the first species mentioned from the erez tree, say the commentators, the cedar, or the some kind of tree like a cedar, the animal will only eat it if the branches and the shoots are somewhat loosened before it, and the animal gets a savor of the vegetable. In the case of the zirin, mefaspesin, no, you cannot break it up in the way that he can with the kifin. He may, of course, untie the bundles so that the animal will be able to get to them, because that is needed to feed the animal. Continuing now with our Mishnah, the second Mishnah, Ein meraskin lo es hashachas v'lo es achoruvin lifnei behemo bein dako bein gaso. Ein meraskin, you cannot crush up the shachas. Shachas is a kind of vegetation that would come, for example, from wheat or barley that was harvested early before the grains had a chance to develop, and this might be fed to animals, known collectively as shachas. This is a grain that is never allowed to reach full term. Ein meraskin es shachas, you cannot crush it up for the animal. V'lo es echoruvin, nor can you crush up the carobs, lifnei behemo bein dako bein gaso, not before a large, a small animal like a sheep or a goat, and not before a large animal like an ox or a cow. the animal is, according to the Tanna Kama, the first view in our Mishnah, able to eat the carobs even without their being crushed up. Rabbi Yehuda matir becharuvin ledako. With the carobs, Rabbi Judah has an independent opinion that it's permissible with the carobs if it's food for the small animal. Well, going on then to the third Mishnah, which speaks about the feeding of animals on the Shabbat. And farmers have occasion not only to feed their animals to keep them alive, but also to either fatten them up, or in the case of a camel, to prepare it for a long journey. In the case of a camel, it is customary to feed the camel with a great deal of feed before a long wilderness journey where feed will not be available. And the term here in our Mishnah 3, ein oivesin es agomel, one cannot press in the food to the camel. That is to say, the Hebrew word oves, which appears in the Tanakh in Isaiah chapter 1, is the place where the animal eats, its manger, its feeding trough. And the oves is that which receives the food for the animal. And oivsin es hagomel would be to stuff the food into the camel, ready for a long journey. Velo dorsin, you cannot literally tread in the food. You cannot push in the food down into the camel deep down to a point where it won't be able to bring it up again. Avol mal'itin, but it is permissible to put the food into the animal's mouth on the Shabbat, distinguishing between different methods of feeding the animal, the degree of force that is involved for preparing the animal for some purpose. The same applies to fattening of animals. Farmers will keep some animals to fatten them up for slaughter and consumption. So continues the Mishnah, Ein mamrim es agolim avol mal'itin. Again, with the agolim, these are the calves. Ein mamrim, you cannot push in the food. The expression of mamarin is related by the commentators to the Hebrew word mari, mem resh yud aleph, which is a term for a fattened calf. And here you cannot fatten up the calf this way by pushing the food deep down where the animal has to eat whether it wants or not. Avol mal'itin, but it's permitted to, again, put the food bit by bit in the animal's mouth. Umahalkatin l'tarnagolim, it's also permitted to feed the tarnagolim, the hens. And continues verse 3, different kinds of preparations of foods that are needed for the animals. It's permitted to put water into the mursan, which would be the bran, which would be used for animal feed and would be mixed with the water to soften it for the animal. But you cannot actually knead it into a paste or a dough for the animal. Only pouring the water is permitted. We, on the Shabbat, want people to have the minimal tircha, the minimal exertion in order to stay with the spirit of the Shabbat, even in the feeding of animals. One may not put water in front of the devorim, the bees, nor in front of the doves that are in the dove cot, the little dove's house that may be in the yard of the homestead. One cannot give water to the bees or to the doves because they are independently able to get to water, these kinds of doves. But it is permitted to put the water in front of the domestic animals, in front of the hens and the geese. And in front of the Yone Hardesios, these are the domesticated doves that actually live in the house, and it is up to the owner to provide them with water. We've encountered the Yonim Hardesios in Maseches Chulin, in chapter 12 of Chulin, where we heard about that these are domesticated birds, that the mitzvah of Shiloh Haken, the sending away of the mother bird from the nest, is not applicable. Here they appear once again in our Mishnah as being a domesticated form of yonim, of pigeons, named after the King Herod. Hardesios is from Herod, who was interested in the cultivation of these birds, thereby concluding the third Mishnah of chapter 24 of Shabbat. So with that, my friends, we will now conclude our studies for today, and with the help of God, I will be back here tomorrow for the next section, the concluding session on the book of Job, and with God's help, the concluding session of Masechet Shabbat. And thereafter, as I've informed you, there will be a break until the end of August, a 2-month break in our studies for some rest and reflection and soul searching on all of our parts, and proceeding with our studies independently. And I hope to be coming back in the month of Elul with the study of Shir Hashirim, the Song of Songs, and with the study of Rabbi Nachman's Likutei Moharan and other subjects that I will announce in the continuation. With that, my dear friends, I will say goodbye to you from Yerushalayim and wish you Hemshech Yom Tov, a continuation of a good day. Shalom from the Holy City.
Hakim anavach nilo mu besai tiyim loich betziyoy bikudoy biyumayni yoylamu etishka